Hey everybody, I know it's been a while, but some random old guy named Griff kept saying that I was stealing some other game creator's IP. My friends and I were stealing IP, and it just dragged me into this whole big drama. And I figured, well, if I'm being accused of something, I should do it. No, I'm joking. But it did make me want to start making videos again, and it made me want to run more community events like a Bronstein. A Bronstein is a style of play where multiple independent actors operate under a fog of war, usually in conflict with one another. And I would like to run one such Bronstein in Lancer. My bros and I, we've been running this kind of game, this style of game in our RPG campaigns. We've integrated the Bronstein pretty seamlessly with the rest of our campaigns. I played it out only in fantasy games so far, but my friends have also run it in sci fi games like Traveler, for instance. And when I look at the factions and the types of conflicting interests Lancer is all about, it really makes me think that Lancer is perfect for a Bronstein. So I'm going to give you folks a brief primer on Lancer and Lancer Battlegroup for those of you who don't know anything about it. I'm also going to go over how we run a Bronstein in Lancer, the sort of mechanisms and basically, adjudication mechanics we'll go over. And also, I'd like to invite you folks to participate in this Bronstein, especially those of you who you like Lancer or you're interested in Lancer, but you haven't gotten an opportunity to actually play it. Totally fine. Come on in. There's a form in the description. Just click on that, jump into the Discord, submit the form, blah, 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 and we'll get you sorted. Now, some of you have no idea what Lancer is. That's totally fine. It is a post-utopian, far-future sci-fi setting where mech chassis are used alongside tanks, jets, spaceships, and good old infantry for the purpose of war. The core of humanity is under a kind of, I don't want to say, communist, kind of like centrally planned core or commission of idealists. Reinforce these values with trade, economic support, occasional gunboat diplomacy, and for the most part, they are the top dogs in the Lancer setting. However, there are a bunch of manufacturers. For instance, there's Horus, Harrison Armory, SSC, IPSN. There are these megacorps are dedicated, well, really three of them are megacorps. They're dedicated to creating mech chassis and a bunch of other materials that people use in their everyday lives. Three of them have standing militaries. A bunch of them regularly come into conflict with Union itself. Some of them have gone to war with Union or engaged in smaller skirmishes. And there are two other major players out there in the galaxy. There's the Karakan trade baronies who trade a lot with Union. They're responsible for Union's industry, but they don't like Union. And then you have this religious organization out there in the fringes, a bunch of psychic people called the Onic Ascendancy. They're a bunch of people who worship basically an AI, and they really do not like Union. They're currently actively at war with them. On top of that, there are smaller factions. There's a bunch of them that are not strong enough to change the galactic map on their own, but they're definitely strong enough to intervene in conflicts that we discuss here. There's also diasporan worlds and cosmopolitans. You have worlds, old colonies that haven't been integrated into any of the major factions yet, or fleets of spaceships that haven't chosen a side, or they consider themselves their own side. Which is the Lancer game encouraging you to inject factions of your own creation into the setting. There's a ton of ideological window dressing that might distract you, a lot of sci-fi details that can and will inform a campaign. It's easy to get intimidated by this game, but quite frankly, I think it's really simple. You could sum it up as a kind of war is how kings argue kind of setting. Thank you, John McGowan, for that. Travel is slow. Most factions do not have access to FTL. They don't have access to faster than light. The FTL that does exist often is bottlenecked in some capacity. What this means is most conflicts are happening at the very fringes of known space, and without the support of whatever, even the larger factions that you have access to, do not support the very fringe conflicts in a way where they're bringing the full might of their military to bear. It's a big galaxy, and people are all over the galaxy, but war is isolated, and that's perfect for our purposes here.
Personnel, Demeter is the gateway to the frontier. By attacking our largest refueling depot, the militia thinks they can shut the door on us. You will correct that perspective. Graves out.
So, how do we take a game designed
Pilots,
for half a
defend the
dozen
hardpoint.
individual mech pilots and use it to represent conflict on an interplanetary scale, an interstellar scale? It's actually pretty easy. We're going to use not Lancer, we're going to use a standalone game that was released for the Lancer setting called Lancer Battlegroup. Your players are going to choose ship hulls. They're going to charge out into deep space. They're going to have weapons and systems and a bunch of other things equipped and mixed and matched, and they're going to charge out into deep space and get into conflict. They're going to fight with their battle group, and on a good day, hundreds of people are going to die. If things go well, hundreds of people on your ships are going to die. The system makes space for ace combat, ace wings that are basically perfect for your Lancers. So if you want to set up a Lancer mission in the context of an active battle, you can do so. But these ace wings, these ace fighters, are usually not the focus, which is perfect because when these conflicts happen out in deep space, it's going to be good. If you only lose a few hundred people, that's fine. But once it starts happening, once these combats start happening near populated worlds, colonies, space stations, whatever have you, it's going to get a lot worse. It's going to get a lot worse. And that's exactly where you and your patrons, the players of this Brownstein, are going to be fighting. Let's talk about setup. Now, a Brownstein won't be anything like your typical campaign prep. This is a collaborative process that requires just some basic social skills to build momentum, enough to take the game's course, its trajectory, right out of your hand. Step one, you're going to get a few sections of the map together. Everything starts with a map. Just get a partially complete map, a few planets and labels ASAP. And then step two is you're going to put this incomplete map in front of your friends and have them start contributing details to this map. And by the way, you don't actually have to tell your friends why you're doing this. You don't need to inform them that you're expecting them to play. You just start off with like, hey Bill, what's a cool Harrison Armory planet? Just ask for orders later on. Bill won't understand what's happening to him. Well, no, you've lured him until it's too late. The point is to save yourself as much work as possible in the beginning. Maybe one of your friends is a Lancer lore buff, another one loves rolling up planets and star systems in games like Worlds Without Number or Traveler, and that's fine. Use the resources at your disposal. Your friends. Step number three, you're going to round out your map and start selecting patrons. When a faction or important NPC starts carrying out orders from somebody outside the table, we've defaulted to calling those people patrons, or those NPCs patrons. You probably want a collection of systems for your first time to keep things abstract, I do mean star systems here, for your patrons. Throw in the rest of your planets and other natural or unnatural phenomena on a map, other factions. Not all of them will be inhabited or player run, so feel free to give yourself a high density map if it inspires you. You're going to start assigning some of the existing Lancer factions to these locations. You could also make your own or do a mix. I highly recommend the client state approach. You have colonies affiliated with the bigger factions, but obviously they don't have the full force of each faction's navy to bear it all. Given the existing Lancer factions are so well primed to engage in conflict with one another, I would only put in custom factions under two cases. Like if they're really, really simple and it doesn't take you much time to throw them together, that's totally fine. And if one of your friends comes up with a patron, I think that's also fine. Let them throw it in. Step number four, you're going to present your patrons with a fleet or have them make their own. Now, Lancer Battlegroup assumes 20 points per player fleet. I don't think that we actually need to start there since we're using a system that wasn't originally designed for PvP. I don't think we need to use 20 points as our standard. You could go with like 16 for major factions, 14 for well-supplied independent factions, 10 for factions that just control a large area or like to move around, and maybe 8 for the particularly small, like mercenaries. I don't recommend changing the upper limit of 20, by the way. It's just if you're going to begin with a smaller point cost, it's probably easier to cobble a fleet together for the inexperienced. And we're not going to be doing as much direct PvP. So once all of your patrons have been assigned to factions or you've scheduled their introduction, it's time to start taking orders. I like to set a time scale of patron orders at around 1 per month, assuming no major problems in carrying them out, like no major complexity or anything like that. The strength of a fleet in battle group is represented by points, so I think that's going to be our currency for this Bronstein. You're going to get more points, you're going to build more ships with those points, you're going to take over more stations and planets, which will in turn give you more points repeat. Players are going to get points by trading with factions. You could spend an order getting it, establishing a trade relationship with another faction, and then both of you are going to, on a repeat basis, get 1 point each. Raiding an inhabited subsector is also going to get you 2 points. And finally, for each station and planet you control, you are going to get, on a repeat basis, 1 point. I did mention earlier that Battlegroup is really not designed for player versus player, and I think that you can hack the system to avoid these kinds of problems with, like, player and NPC asymmetry in their actions. So maybe I'll talk about those hacks later, but for the moment I have a few quick resolve rules. There's just 5 of them and they're actually pretty simple. Rule number 1, when fleets engage, each fleet is going to lose points equal to their difference in point cost. If a 10-pointer and an 8-pointer start fighting, each fleet is going to lose 2 points. Number 2, each fleet then rolls 1d6 to either increase the enemy's losses or reduce their own. If you would reduce your own losses to 0, you apply whatever is left over, the overflow, basically, to the enemy. And I would probably say that the smaller fleet can only use this die to defend. They don't really get a choice between the two, except for the overflow I just talked about. Number 3, the difference in fleet points can't reduce an opposing fleet to 0. Instead, the larger fleet rolls 2d6 while the smaller fleet rolls 1d6. In this case, both fleets can choose whether to increase losses inflicted or reduce losses taken, and because the larger fleet has 2 dice, they can split that however they'd like. Number 4, when your fleet loses points, you're going to choose a vessel and apply the point reduction to that vessel. If this reduces the vessel to 0, like if the losses taken are higher than the point cost of the actual ship, then it's destroyed, and you're going to move on to the next vessel until all of your losses are accounted for. A vessel which loses points but is not destroyed is in need of repairs and no longer counts for comparing fleet points until it's fully repaired. And for number 5, our last rule, you can repair any vessel at a station by spending points on it. There's no limit to how many points you can spend on repairs. If you repair it at another faction station, though, they are going to charge you a fee. They're going to double the price, at minimum. This extra fee is going to go straight into their pockets, but anybody nearby can pay or offer to split the bill. So if it's an allied fleet, allied station, maybe there's a more even exchange there. So that's the majority, that's basically the mechanics for this Bronstein. But I have one other really important piece of advice for running. Do not take a ton of questions at the start of this Bronstein. Don't take questions really at all at the start. Repeat after me. I see that you have a lot of questions, but first I need to know. Are you going to attack? Are you going to raid? Are you going to scout, explore, trade? Or do I need to hand this faction off to somebody else? This is not the time for 30 people to start wasting your time asking if I'm allowed to do this or I'm allowed to do that. Trust me, that kills Bronsteins right at the beginning here. If people can't act from the get-go, that's totally fine. Just hand it off to somebody else or ignore them until they get their stuff together. Everybody has the opportunity to earn the right to ask questions later on. Now this brings us to the Battle Bronstein. A single session variant of our Bronstein is where we call it a Battle Bronstein. It's where folks are submitting orders and play out actions basically in a single night, a single session if you will. You can bring patrons into your house, into your game store, you can bring them into a Discord, whatever, and set them loose. You're going to put the main map in front of everybody. It's a rough approximation of common knowledge in this case. Your patrons here are going to call out orders, they're going to take other patrons to the side, and then they're going to submit new orders, all just to stab each other in the back, and that's exactly what we want here.
It's your lucky day, hero. I'm not going to kill you. I don't work for free. But you don't get to kill me, either. Yeah, you earned this, eh?
Listen, that Vanguard-class Titan is still in there.
Not my problem, Marta. Should have put it in my contract.
And this is fantastic because a lot of Lancer missions are focused on denying resources, denying fleets, denying important assets that are going to change the outcome of a conflict. So, what better fodder for active missions than an active conflict supported by an active separate game or generated by an active game? My friend Jeffro Johnson and many of my other friends here love to refer to Bronstein's as the kind of missing key, the missing link to an active campaign structure that's generated sort of on the fly and maximally responsive to player actions while also providing them as many quest opportunities as they could possibly want. I think it works well for Lancer in particular because it has designated downtime rules. Unlike D&D, Lancer has dedicated downtime between missions for players to gain reserves. This means the long travel time between systems actually kind of works in our favor here. Player missions can be handled more comparably to our rough 1 month orders, and missions can kind of be paced in conjunction with changes in the Bronstein. So I think I went on long enough here. I would like to do like a quick follow-up FAQ. I should probably just release that on Monday. A few other thoughts I have about this Bronstein, but if you would like to get a little bit more of an advance notice of that, I am going to run a Lancer Bronstein. I have a form here in the bottom of the description. You can click on that and apply to be part of this Bronstein, and I look forward to playing with you. But besides that, man, it feels really good to get back into the saddle. It feels really good to get recording again. I have a new apartment here, and it has differing audio problems, but I don't have to worry about a roommate causing a bunch of noise, and so it's a matter of just like fine-tuning the audio settings for my new environment here, and then we're back on schedule. I look forward to making videos about Lancer. It's a lot of fun here. Thank you to Mariana for the art. Thank you to Titanfall for existing. And yeah, I'll see you later.